Your image will come boxed and have protective cones to ensure the edges of the print are not damaged in transit. The first job will be cut the digital print into the individual drops. Do this carefully, making sure that you do not damage the printed image. It is important that you work in a clean, tidy and clutter-free environment. Time spent preparing and planning will not be wasted and is vital to a successful job. Let's look at this in more detail, starting with the environment in which you will be working. Working in messy or dusty conditions will make it harder for you to work properly and may result in costly damage to the image that you are trying to install. Ideally, there should be no other tradesmen working in the area, and your installation should be the last job before the area is complete and occupied for normal use. Once you have cut your drops, number them in the appropriate installation sequence. Laying out the print in this way will also help check the print for shading or print faults and will enable you to visualize how the image will look once installed. Once you've cut your drops, lay them out in sequence in readiness for aligning the crop marks. Now is also a good moment to check for any obvious defects or problems. Now let's look at the correct techniques for the installation itself, starting with looking at and setting out the image. On the white borders of the print you will find crop marks which look like this. These crop marks should be lined up as shown, with the leader lines matching over one another in order that you can gauge the full width of the print. For added security whilst laying out the print, you can use masking tape or staples on the white border areas to hold the image in place. This lining up of the crop marks is a very important part of the installation process, as it will assist you with your plotting out calculations. Therefore, care should be taken to align these match points as close as possible. You will need to repeat this process for each of your subsequent drops. Once you have done this matching and taping for the entire image, you will have an excellent appreciation of the entire job, but more importantly, as you will soon see, you will be able to calculate the overall dimensions of your image, enabling you to set out your image on the wall properly. Now you have the image laid out, measure the full width of the print. The full width of the print does not include the white borders. Only measure from edge to edge of the image. Make a note of this measurement. Once you have the width of the image, mark out where the middle of the print is, making a note of this measurement on the white border. Measure back from the centre mark we have just identified, working back to the edge of drop 1. We will call this measurement A. This is an important measurement which will ensure that you have centred the image on the wall. Whilst drop 1 is laid out, measure from top to the bottom of the drop. We will call this measurement B, and it is important in ensuring the image is horizontally centred. Now you have laid the print out and have these important measurements A and B, you can now start to trim off the entire white border. The white border on your first drop can be left on, as this will give you a straight edge to line up with your plumb line. Once a drop is trimmed, you should number it using the soft lead pencil. When trimming off the white border, you can, if required, leave the bleed marks on, as these can sometimes help you achieve a match when the design on the image have few match points, for example a blue sky, or anything with plain blocks of colour. These techniques will apply when setting out each of your drops, however many you have. We will now need to look at setting out the wall. As we did with the image, measure the full width of the wall. Remember, measurement A was the distance from the centre of the image to the edge of drop 1. Using a soft lead pencil, mark the centre line of the wall. From this centre mark, plot out the wall where measurement A falls. Mark the wall at this point. You will now need to establish the midway point on the height of the wall. Do this by measuring the height along the plumbed line and taking the midway point. You will be using this mark to align the centre point you marked earlier on your first drop, measurement B. We now have our horizontal and vertical starting points for drop 1. Mark a plumbed line on the wall at measurement A, against which you will be aligning the edge of your first drop. We now need to mark the wall with tram lines where our joints will fall. This will help you by giving a gauge when pasting up, but more importantly will prevent you from applying adhesive in the areas of the joints. This is important as we want to keep these areas dry of adhesive to prevent the underlap sticking to the wall and making it difficult to remove when making the joint. Having established where the joint falls, mark the wall top, middle and bottom. Measure 5 cm back from this point and strike a line. This will identify the area in which you will not paste. This technique is of paramount importance when working over emulsion paint. Once the wall is plotted out, it should resemble this, with a vertical plumb line, your horizontal centre mark, and tram lines where the joints of the image will fall. You are now ready to paste the wall for your first drop.